Hello viewers, and welcome to the 5th episode of Watchtower in Focus. I wasn't anticipating doing another episode quite this quickly, but since the annual meeting there has been some interesting developments, shall we say, in Ireland. We're going to be going into a little bit more detail, but essentially it involves the mishandling of child sex abuse in that country. Joining us to help talk about these developments is JWsurvey's editor, Covert Fade.
Hi everybody, it's good to be back.
Hello Covert. And again joining us from America, John Redwood.
Hi everybody.
Now we have a special guest as well joining us. Jason Wynne is a contact for JWsurvey who has inside knowledge of child sex abuse mishandling, and he is joining us from Galway in Ireland. Hello Jason.
Hello everybody, thanks that I'm here.
It's really, really good of you to join us, Jason, especially since this involves your country. So all I can say, how can I summarize this? Well, basically, we're having this conversation on the evening of Monday, 30th of October. I say evening, it's evening here in Europe. Yesterday, Sunday the 29th of October, there was an investigative article released in the Sunday Business Post in Ireland, and on the front page of the article, the blurb read, "The Jehovah's Witnesses religion is coming under mounting criticism for its handling of child sexual abuse allegations in Ireland." It then had the slogan or the headline, "A failure to bear witness?" ? And I'll just read for you, if I may, the first paragraph. It says, "In the summer of 2016, elders in an Irish Jehovah's Witnesses congregation were informed of a case of alleged child sexual abuse within their flock. According to the religion's own internal rule in force at the time, when elders encounter a case of child sexual abuse, they are required to contact the legal department of the London-based Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Britain, also known simply as the Watchtower." Now, obviously it's quite a long article that's been written by Barry J. White, but it's an excellent expose article. And one of the reasons why I was so keen to do this, and I know Covert and John Redwood were keen to do it as well, is because we know about the story. We've been contacted, or we were contacted when the original scandal was first unfolding. John, maybe you could tell the viewers a little bit more about the timeline of events.
Well, the timeline actually begins a little more than a year ago, when we had written an article on JWsurvey related to child abuse. We've written several on the Watchtower letters explaining child abuse policy. And following one of those articles, we received a contact from an individual that we can't name, but an individual in Ireland who made us aware that there was a child abuser who was attending one of the congregations in Ireland, and he didn't provide a lot of information at first, but following our discussions with him, we discovered more information about the individual as well as the elder body. And what we had found out was that the elders were permitting this individual to be a member of the congregation, which was largely unknowing of the fact that there was a child abuser in their midst. And if we fast forward, we received contacts within the past several months from some of the individuals within that congregation who were upset about what was going on with this child abuser. And I'll let Jason explain a little bit more detail about who we spoke to, although we're going to keep these names anonymous. But it's sufficient for us to say that there were elders within a particular congregation who were upset with the fact that the elder body was being asked not to report allegations of child sexual abuse to the police, and that ultimately 2 elders were removed as elders from the organization. They actually were sanctioning 4 elders. 2 were officially deleted as elders because they had gone to the police and had reported this particular person who is a known child abuser in Ireland. And so I'll leave it at that.
Well, that's kind of what I find to be the most shocking aspect of this story. Covert, we were talking about this off air before, and it's one of the reasons why we were also keen to do this episode, is that this is the first time, to our knowledge, that there has been a clear case of elders being disciplined by Watchtower for doing their duty and reporting child sex abuse to the authorities.
Yeah, this as you say, Lloyd, I'm not aware of any confirmed cases of this happening before, where elders have done what any right-minded person in there would do when they find out a case of, serious crime taking place, reporting that crime to the authorities, where the victim is probably one of the most vulnerable, is a child, one of the most vulnerable victims. And as a result, they've been sanctioned for doing so. I think what we'll see as we go on to discuss this is there are certain aspects of this case which we will have heard before in other cases, if people are familiar with the way that Watchtower handles abuse cases. But this particular one, we haven't had any confirmed instances of this happening before, and it really does stand out as a first, and is kind of all the more disturbing because of it.
So, again, you alluded to this earlier, John. This basically came to our attention because of material that we were putting out about child sex abuse. We were approached. Now, with this being a story in Ireland, or basically an ongoing scandal in Ireland, it made sense to reach out to Jason, who we all know. He's a friend of JWsurvey. And Jason, would I be right in saying that you were able to, not just kind of look into what was happening in terms of, emails and correspondence, but you were also able to actually speak to some of those involved yourself?
Yes, that's exactly yes. I think the main reason why someone got in contact with JWsurvey was because of how the elders were dealt with. These elders were being disciplined for doing the right thing. Literally, what happened was a person came to JWsurvey because he felt that these elders went to the police and gave an account, a statement of what had happened in their congregation. Very simple. They didn't give a huge amount of details, and I'll go into that later. So they got in contact with JWsurvey because they felt that this needs to be highlighted. The person who talked to me initially was very frustrated about how things were being done in his congregation. He felt he still believes that this is the true religion, and that for that reason, things like this shouldn't happen. And he reached out to JWsurvey to try and see what could we do to help correct a wrong that had been done in his congregation, not just in terms of how they dealt with child abuse, but also how they dealt with the elders dealing with child abuse. So what we tried to do at first was try to ascertain exactly what had happened, because it seemed to have been a lot of events that happened prior to coming to JWsurvey. So via email, we talked, myself and John Redwood, we talked to this person and we asked a lot of questions to find out, well, what did the elders do? When did these events take place? And what was going to happen next? So just trying to get my thoughts here clearly.
No problem. It was, as I recall, there were emails, there was actual correspondence provided from the branch, which we'll go into later, and kind of piecing everything together was quite a task. I was actually seriously considering at one point, flying to Dublin to try and figure out what was going on, because as soon as I understood the significance of the story, namely that elders were being punished by Watchtower, I thought, well, this is something that needs a bright light shining on it. And I can remember feeling very grateful that you were there to kind of be a contact point.
I think it's worthy to mention, too, the fact that anyone watching this is going to find it really bizarre that persons are contacting us anonymously because of fear of being sanctioned by the organization that they belong to, that there's such a fear. And you would ask, what is the fear over? Why can't you just pick up the phone and call the police and let them know that there's an allegation of child sexual abuse and just let them handle that? So that's the environment that we're dealing with. We've had multiple anonymous emails from persons within several congregations who are afraid of being disfellowshipped or reproved or shunned as a result of their simply wanting to have child abuse situations taken care of.
That's actually a really good point, John, because what you've done there is explain how the issue of shunning dovetails perfectly with the issue of child sex abuse, because what the shunning does is it makes it harder for us to get to the bottom of things, and therefore things continue to be covered up. I'll give you an example. This is an excellently written article. I can tell reading it that Barry is a very good journalist who knows his stuff, but even he is having to kind of hold back a little bit in terms of information that he's sharing. For example, I'll read you one part. He says, the Watchtower also advised the elders how they ought to handle the fact that the matter was the subject of a Garda investigation. Garda is obviously the Irish police. As the secular authorities are investigating this matter, this is the letter, if approached, please arrange for 2 elders to telephone the legal department at the branch for legal advice before discussing the matter with the authorities, the letter said. They also decided, this is Watchtower, to discipline those elders who had been involved in notifying the Garda according to people familiar with the matter. Now, if you're a Jehovah's Witness watching this, reading this covert, you're going to latch onto any kind of ambiguity at all. And you're going to say, oh, well, this is only what some people who say they're familiar with the matter are saying.
Yeah, this is, and to be honest, I can remember when I was a believing Jehovah's Witness, I would do the same. I would look for any reason to discount or discredit reports that came in that were not favourable to the faith. I think as you said, this is clearly an excellent article, and I can think that a lot of this is sometimes there are obviously some witnesses who will never take these things seriously because of their own devotion to the faith. Thankfully, I think many members of the general public will see this as a genuine piece of news that needs to be studied carefully. And I think even so, even many witnesses, I mean, as we're seeing, the people who are, as we know, there are people who are involved in the actual events who have contacted. Clearly, they've spoken to this journalist. They've spoken to other people. So there are witnesses inside the organization who are aware that things aren't right. And I think that's articles like this. If you are a witness who maybe in your own congregation has experienced something similar where things were not handled correctly, it probably becomes easier to then see another report of it as well. So whilst I suspect there are many witnesses who will look for reasons to dismiss this, and unfortunately this is why the shunning aspect and the retaliation aspect makes it very hard for whistleblowers to do their job. I think there will be increasingly witnesses who are disposed to believing, seeing through their own bias and seeing that this account is credible. And also, I think for the general public, this is clearly, I think, something the general public is becoming more and more aware of. which is important.
And I think also what's very important here, and what it is what John touched on, is the fact that elders are discovering that we can actually help them, because even elders are coming to the realization that if they go and try to fix things, they know that suddenly, once they start to see the responses they're getting from the Watchtower, they suddenly see, oh, if I keep going here, I'm going to end up outside. I'm going to be shunned. There's nothing I can do. I can't even protect myself then. So I better keep my mouth shut, go along with it. Or there's the other option. I can go and I can use people like JWsurvey to be able to help to make changes, because this is what's happened here. We've seen where someone has come to us, we've taken the information, we've analyzed that information, we then managed to go to a journalist to be able to get that message out there. Because now what this is, it's quite embarrassing for Watchtower to be shown up as covering up, even though they say at the very end that they absolutely do not cover up child abuse. The question has to be asked, in what vein have they not covered up? If they go and tell people not to report child abuse and then discipline those elders for reporting child abuse, that is cover up.
Jason, actually, while you're there, I'm kind of hoping that you can kind of clarify. I mean, we're talking about elders being punished. We're right in saying, aren't we, that they were actually deleted as elders. Two were deleted as elders for reporting to the authorities. I mean, we can't. We're not in a position where we can prove that at the moment, because we would be identifying people by doing that. But that's actually the case.
The case is that there was actually 4 elders that made statements to the police. And because they made statements, what happened is that 3 senior members of Watchtower had to come over and discipline them.
Yeah.
And they had to go and say to them that you went against what we told you, which is disloyalty, and it lacks soundness of mind, because soundness of mind is to see the rational thought of what Watchtower says to you, even if it goes against your own self, what you think is right. Once you go against that, it lacks soundness of mind. So what they had to do was say, okay, let's look at the evidence and what they've done. And they disciplined one because he went off and he went and reported directly against everything. He went and made a statement to the police. Then after that, the other 3 elders went and made statements as well. So they decided that the one who went off and did it negligently reporting, he was to be deleted. The other person that was deleted was the coordinator of Body of Elders, and he was deleted simply because he didn't keep control of the matter, and he went along and made statement as well. The other 2 elders, just because they went along, they were let off because they're not senior members, and so that was the case.
Now, we're talking, you mentioned just now about a committee being sent to deal with this. Now, I think it's worthwhile just kind of labouring on this point so that viewers can understand a little bit about the logistics here, because I'm right in saying, aren't I, Jason, that obviously there was a branch in Ireland and it closed down. It was near Dublin, if I recall. And from that point forward, Ireland came under the jurisdiction of the Britain branch.
Yes. So in the mid-90s, a branch was built in Wicklow, which is south of Dublin. And then some years later, not many years later, I think maybe 6 to 10 years later, they shut it down. So, and they would have made a pretty penny as well. So all operations still took place in Ireland up until I think it was last year, the year before. So they had some building in Wicklow as well. That's where the entity resided, but that has since changed over to London. So a handful of the directors of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Ireland reside in Ireland. The rest reside in London. So there is still a Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Ireland as an entity. It still exists.
Right. So they're basically keeping the entity on life support, but for all intents and purposes, affairs of Jehovah's Witnesses in Ireland are administered from London. And
So
when we're
John,
yeah.
Sorry, guys, didn't mean to interrupt. Just to quickly, it's probably worth making the point here. This is the second major child abuse scandal that the London branch has been involved with, because we've previously this year had the ongoing investigation by the Charity Commission, which is already the London branch was heavily involved with, mounted legal challenges to try and shut the investigation down. And the final Charity Commission report into the way the witnesses acted, which included the way the London branch was acting, was extremely damning. And here we have again another incident of the mishandling of child abuse, this time even to the point where elders are being sanctioned for reporting a crime. And once again, the London branch of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is directly involved. So that's probably worth noting. This is the second.
I don't think it's even the second, because we can also bring in the civil lawsuit, A versus Watchtower, in the Royal Courts of Justice, I think it was.
That's true, yeah.
So anyway, it's a great point, Covert, that we're kind of getting into a number of cases now of very serious negligence. But just to kind of come back to this issue of events in Ireland being or affairs in Ireland being administered from London, what I'm getting at is that there was a letter sent. I'm looking at it now. I'm not going to give any names or details, but the letter is dated September 9th, 2016. It's from the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, the Ridgeway, London, which is the Bethel in London, to the body of elders in this congregation. Now, it gives basically instructions for there to be a special committee, or it announces that a special committee has been formed, because there are 4 elders who are kind of on the chopping block in one congregation. Watchtower in London says, well, we're going to appoint a special committee to investigate what's happening. They're obviously not going to necessarily choose elders who are from that congregation, assuming there are more that can be chosen from, or necessarily even neighbouring congregations. It makes sense for them to appoint elders from further away, but they actually send elders from London to this congregation in Ireland. Now, if you're from London, or if you're from the UK, or if you're from Ireland, you know that it's not cheap to make that journey. And in this letter, which is one of the most outrageous parts of the story, I think, Jason, it says, naturally, you will appreciate that the special committee will incur some financial costs involved with assisting you in this matter, and we would appreciate your seeking to cover these. So what they're saying to this congregation is, we are flying 3 elders from London to your congregation, and you can pay for it. Would that be right, Jason?
That's exactly us. Yep. So sent over 3 elders, and they had to pay for them to come over and put them up and send them back.
Which is really adding insult to injury, isn't it, really? Because it's Watchtower in London that has put them in this situation to begin with.
Correct.
Astonishing.
I think it was interesting. One statement in that letter, right after the part that you just read, Lloyd, was the statement that says, we feel sure that you will appreciate further opportunity for all to be able to freely express themselves before any final decision is made. And I found that statement to be interesting, because they're saying that the elders and anyone involved, including the 3 on this witch hunt committee that are being sent to Ireland, are free to express themselves. And so you can imagine these 4 elders that are on the chopping block saying, look, we are just interested in the well-being of the child, which is why we went to the Garda or the police. And we are also interested in the well-being not only of the congregation, but of our local community, which may come into contact with this person who's a known child abuser. So the fact that they're telling these elders that they can freely express themselves, yet we know exactly what happened. The result was that 2 elders were deleted from the congregation. Really, I think, is a contrast between what they're saying they can do by freely expressing themselves and the authority that Watchtower has over this organization and over the lives of these elders. Imagine how their families felt and the congregation felt when they were deleted. And what are they going to tell the congregation? What are they going to tell the families? It's all kept very secret. These people don't know that these elders were deleted because they wanted to protect children in the community.
Indeed. Jason, I'm actually hoping that you can kind of fill us in to the best of your knowledge. I mean, we're talking about events from the summer of last year, so roughly August, September 2016. We're now in October 2017. What's the situation now? I mean, I'm not expecting you to know whether these elders are still deleted, but am I right in saying that there is a congregation in Ireland where there is a known pedophile and he is attending meetings? I think I've read correspondence saying that families have been notified that he is in the congregation, so it's not like people are completely oblivious. But essentially, it's left for him to police himself and make sure he's not in contact with children. Is that summarising the situation fairly?
Not entirely. So
Right, okay.
what happened was he was a judicial committee was created when it first came out, and it was found that he was repentant, and so he was reproved. Subsequent to that, when exactly, I'm not really sure, but then discovered that there was more victims.
Right.
And he has since been disfellowshipped.
Right. Okay.
So
he's not attending the Kingdom Hall at the moment.
Whether he's attending Kingdom Hall, I'm not sure.
Right. Okay.
The last I heard is that he was attending Kingdom Hall, but I'm not sure.
So it could be that he's trying to get reinstated, but we obviously aren't able to kind of attend meetings and give updates on that kind of thing. Yes. A shocking story, and I'm glad. I mean, again, it was a very well written article. I just feel as though this is a story that where we need to kind of plant a flag and say we know what happened. We have the correspondence. It's actually worse. the reality is worse than it sounds in the article in many ways.
If you look at and again, if we go back to this, it all comes down, and in many ways, not only were the elders sanctioned for reporting a case of child sexual abuse to the police, but the reasons they were sanctioned, coming back to it again, the charges were lacking soundness of mind and being disloyal. So in other words, as far as the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society were concerned, to report a case for an elder, to report a case of child abuse to the authorities showed a lack of soundness of mind. So the Watchtower's idea of soundness of mind is that if you know there's a child abuser or you hear an accusation, you don't report it to the police. And being disloyal. So they are more concerned about loyalty to their organization than they are about the authorities being notified when there is a serious crime, a serious assault taking place. The article, if people read it, I mean, as a former Jehovah's Witness, and everyone on this call, I'm sure, knows that one of the unfortunate traits of the Watchtower organization is that it very much places the reputation and the well-being of the organization far, far above individual rights and far above the welfare of individual people. But it's probably quite shocking for members of the public to read that the elders were sanctioned because it was considered disloyal to report a child abuser to the police rather than just letting Watchtower's own internal process handle it. And as we've seen, the internal process, from what I understand, from what Jason was saying, returned a reproof. So in other words, this man basically got a slap on the wrist at first and went back into the congregation, and only got disfellowshipped later when further offences came to light. So if those offences hadn't come to light, they would have simply slapped him on the wrist, tried their best to keep an eye on him, as far as a bunch of untrained men who cannot monitor this man 24/7 could do, and he'd go back into the congregation. And the Watchtower would have been quite fine with that. So it really does highlight where Watchtower's priorities are as an organization. I think it's one of the, as you said, it's really worth planting a flag in this, because it crystallizes, despite whatever the Watchtower public relations team might say in their press releases, their conduct in this case makes it crystal clear that their primary concern is for the reputation of their own organization. And the welfare of the children involved comes very much separate to that.
Mm.
And can I just say something that's quite, I think is very important. When this came to us at first, the person who came to us really wanted us to get it out there quickly that people need to know what's going on here. But John Redwood and myself, what we said is, no, we got to slow down here. We can't rush these things. These are not things where you just rush them out and get them out into the public domain. He wanted to go to any paper, get papers involved, get anyone involved to see what the wrong was here. What we did was we slowly found out all the details we could possibly find out, and we found out quite a lot. So much so that by June of this year, I went and approached a director of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society of Ireland. I stood in front of him and I asked him to speak with me. He turned to me and he said, "Jason, I understand that you're disfellowshipped." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I cannot talk to you." I said, "Okay." So I got into the car. The following week, I met an elder in town and I handed him a letter and I said to him, "Tell this particular director of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society that I want to talk to him. If he doesn't talk to me, I'm going to the papers." So that elder gave that letter, which was regarding this case, to the director. So Watchtower at this stage knew exactly that I knew too much. I knew an awful lot, especially when I had this letter. And they would have been wondering how I got this letter. And they would have been pointing fingers and blaming people, and they have no idea who gave us the letter. In fact, we don't even know who gave us the letter. But what happened then was very interesting. This is how the Sunday Business Post got printed this week. Is Watchtower knew that I was going to go public with it. So what they did was to combat this, and the timing of the work that I did was that I then told them I was going to go public, so that put them into panic mode. So they went and thought, you know what, he's probably going to go to one of the tabloids. So let's go and get a serious newspaper. So they went to the Sunday Business Post and asked them to come to their district assembly in July 14th of this year to do a PR piece. So Barry J. White went and did a PR piece on the Friday and got the usual PR stuff, but he had asked a certain amount of questions. He had also asked ex-JWs to talk to him and get their feedback. So he did a very balanced article about Jehovah's Witnesses, so it wasn't all PR, and I'm sure they were a bit frustrated by that. In the meantime, I wrote a letter to every single elder on this island, north and south of the border. So every elder got the letter and got a letter from me, which was a 6-page letter. It named this pedophile. It also had pictures of this pedophile. And it warned them that they should. They got it on the Thursday of their meeting before, the week before the convention. So it was timed so that they had time to be able to tell their congregants that there may be a pedophile at the assembly. So basically, I set a trap and Watchtower fell into it. They got Barry J. White to write an article about them the following week. They also, at the same time, they then wrote a letter to an email to all of the CBOEs and told them to destroy the letter that I wrote and not to show it to any of the other elders. So when Barry J. White wrote his article, the PR piece, I emailed him the following week and complimented him on such a good, balanced article. And he said he wanted to do some more. And I said, I have something interesting that you might be interested in. And I sent him the letter that I sent to all the elders. He phoned me straight away and he says, "Jason, we have a story." And so then a whole investigation took place from July of this year right up until yesterday to get all the facts in place that we could write this article. And so I have to compliment Barry White, first of all, for the work he's put in. He's put in an awful lot of work into this just to get a good story and get all the facts right. And he has got all the facts right. And he also put in a bunch of other information that a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses in Ireland would not know about, such as the Australian Royal Commission, the UK Charity Commission, and also of other victims in this country. Also, I'd like to point out, I'd like to thank the person who got to JWsurvey in the first place. They were really trying to push us to get a story, but we wanted to take our time and get that story out there and get a story as strong as possible and as powerful as possible that people would stop and take note.
Well, it sounds like you've done some fantastic work there, first of all, Jason. I think that's a really important point that you make. You were writing a letter to warn elders that there may be a pedophile at the convention. Now, we've just been reading about, or we've been referring to correspondence where it talks about how elders have been warning a pedophile not to go near children, and X, Y, and Z kind of requirements for how he should conduct himself in a congregation setting. Once you take that person and you put them in a convention scenario, all of that goes out of the window. How can you possibly track this individual as he's wandering around the convention venue, and how can you just simply trust that he'll stick to what elders have told him to do? So I think it's a fantastic kind of service that you've done, even if the letter wasn't read. You can basically look at yourself in the mirror and say, I did my best.
Yeah, Jason, I was wondering if maybe you could comment. I don't know if all of our listeners are aware of that we don't have in the UK and Ireland at the moment very specific child abuse reporting laws, and this kind of plays into the Watchtower's control over their elders and what they do, what they don't do, what they report to their legal department. I think we all know by now that elders are required to report everything to the legal department in whichever branch they fall under. But could you comment on what the situation is in Ireland as well as the UK as far as what the laws are in terms of, do they have mandatory reporting? And I understand that there's going to be some changes coming that may affect mandatory reporting.
Yeah, so and this was something that Barry brought out as well in his article, and I don't know if one of you can see if you can find that section. I think it's towards the end of the article while I'm talking. So in Ireland, right, they brought in this new act. It's called the Children First Act, and it was brought in November 19th, 2015. And only parts of it are in place at the moment. And one of those parts is that you cannot physically chastise a child. There is no provision in law now where you can justify hitting a child. So that came in December 11, 2015. Since then, there's been no changes to that law, or the rest of the law hasn't been enacted. But come December 11th of this year, the whole lot of that act will be in place. And part of that act is mandatory reporting. So clergymen and those pastoral workers will be required to report any allegations of child sexual abuse or any other abuse to children.
Yeah, there's a part where it says, when contacted by the Sunday Business Post, a spokesperson for the department, I think it's the department who cares for that, said that mandated persons included a member of the clergy, howsoever described, or pastoral care worker, howsoever described, of a church or other religious community. The spokesman pointed out that under the Criminal Justice Act, it is a criminal offence to withhold information about a serious offence against a person under 18 years of age, while all persons, whether mandated reporters or not, should report reasonable concerns in relation to child welfare and protection to Tulsa. As far as the UK is concerned, I could probably do another episode just on on the complexities of reporting in the UK. I've been contacted by I've spoken to different people, shall we say, and it isn't as simple as to say yes, there is mandatory reporting. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and typically Watchtower finds a way of kind of working through the cracks. I think that the gist of what the article's saying is that there's a long way to go, and it also mentions, John, you were there with me at the reveal event in London, weren't you? And there was a gentleman there who I'm struggling to find his name.
Yeah, we had
Jeffrey Shannon, who gave a fantastic speech on basically the situation in Ireland and what's being done, and he's quoted quite prominently in this article, basically saying that the same kind of scrutiny that was given to the Catholic Church needs to be given to Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yes, and sorry, John, I think that's a very important comparison, because as an Irishman and living through the whole scandal with the Catholic Church and the child sexual abuse through the 80s and 90s, we as Jehovah's Witnesses thought, well, this is just great because all these problems, all those Catholics now will join us. So as we're going door to door, we'll be able to show them that we are the one true religion. We would never do anything such as this. But here we have the Special Rapporteur on Child Protection now comparing God's true religion, I put in inverted commas, compared with the Catholic Church, which inverted commas is Babylon the Great. So when you see that that the Special Rapporteur on Child Protection is comparing us to Babylon the Great when it comes to child sexual abuse, we really need to stop and think, what on earth are we doing? What is the leaders of our religion doing that people would consider our child sexual abuse policies as being in comparison to those of Babylon the Great?
Yeah, Professor Shannon is quoted as saying, there is a growing concern internationally that within the hierarchy of the Jehovah's Witnesses, in some cases, there is a premium placed on the institution to the detriment of the welfare of children. Definitely echo those sentiments, Covert.
Yeah, I think as has been pointed out, the fact that the Catholic Church is being referenced in this article, I mean, for many years, the Catholic Church, because of the scandals that came out in its past, has become almost the sort of the easy reference term for the generic cover-up or mishandling of child abuse in an institution. It's a reference point. So if people find out about abuse cover-up in a school or an organization or a religion, it's sort of, people say, echoes of the Catholic Church. And again, the fact that it's being referenced again here for the Jehovah's Witnesses, I mean, I too remember when the Catholic Church scandal was breaking, how the witnesses, without sounding too ghoulish, absolutely loved the fact that the church was getting all this bad press because it showed how poor Babylon the Great was. But I think that's one of the reasons why this will resonate with, because I'm sure witnesses will read this. And this will resonate with them. The way, I mean, I just want to quickly, if it's okay, touch on the statement that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society issued in response to this investigation. To be honest, if you've read this statement once, you've read it 1,000 times, because it's basically the same generic statement that gets put out at the end of every single investigation. It never addresses any of the specific allegations or the specific points of fact that are established in the news report or anything like that. It's very generic. But the statement is demonstrably incorrect. So, for example, it says, congregation elders do not shield abusers from the authorities. Well, it's very nice to say that, but if you're going to then sanction congregation elders who report abusers to authorities, you can't simultaneously claim that congregation elders have no pressure not to shield that abuser from the authorities. It says, anyone who commits the sin of child abuse faces expulsion from the congregation. Well, we've already seen that it can just get you reproved if you've only done it once and you convince everyone that you're sorry. If such a person is serving in a position of responsibility, he is removed. Well, the evidence of this investigation proves that if an elder reports such a person to the police, he also, if he is serving in a position of responsibility, will be removed. So there are basically two options here for Watchtower. Either the London branch has gone rogue and is operating policy that is not consistent with the Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, in which case, at the very minimum, the members of the branch involved in this should be stripped of their responsibilities, reproved, or if unrepentant, disfellowshipped. Or the London branch has not gone rogue and is implementing the authorized policy of the worldwide Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses, in which case this statement is a barefaced lie. There's no two ways about this. Either they have a rogue branch or this statement is a lie. Rather than tackle one or the other, so rather than saying we have a rogue branch but we're dealing with it, or rather than trying to justify what was done, deal with this question of why were these elders removed and try and give some justifications to why they did it, they just lie. And this generic cookie-cutter statement is getting less credible every time I see it. And I think they're not understanding the problem. I think they think they can just bury their head in the sand and keep issuing this statement and everything will be fine. Well, we've seen that this issue is growing worldwide. It seems fairly clear to me that the momentum is growing. Individual witnesses who are involved in this, as you said, Jason, I mean, the very brave individuals who approached, who made the approach, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, clearly, or were associated in some way, or inside that congregation. Maybe they still believe in the religion. They may well do, but this has clearly disturbed them enough that they felt they had to do something about it. So even within the ranks of the Watchtower, this behavior is corrosive and it's crumbling. It's crumbling Watchtower's support from within. And I actually for one thing, I think these witnesses are very brave who reported it. And I also think I feel very, very much for them because they must be really suffering right now, trying to juggle, on the one hand, the conduct of an organization that they believe to be the organization of the true God that is simultaneously behaving in such a terrible way. I hope it leads them towards waking up, but I can well understand maybe kind of the mental and emotional turmoil that they're in, and my heart goes out to them.
Yes, just on that, you just reminded me of a point that was made as well. Those three senior brothers that came over from London, the one mentioned in the September 9, 2016 letter, he said to those four elders, he said, and these are his words, "We did not tell you not to report." And the elder said, no, you did. We have it in our notes. You told us not to report. He says, listen to me very carefully now, brothers. We did not tell you not to report. And so you can see what he was doing there. He was telling them. How
Orwellian is that? Just rewriting history.
And it's very interesting that he used a double negative as well. I always find when the Watchtower uses a double negative, it really it confuses the brain, and you just shut down, and you don't. It's
yeah. Well, that's the language that's specifically used in the Watchtower's, I believe, the 2016 and the latest 2017 letters, in which they tell the elders that they don't tell them that they are not to report, but that exactly what you just said. In other words, don't tell someone that they can't report, if I'm saying that correctly. In regards to what Covert said, I would like to add to the fact that we have so many people that are coming forward and not in any way related to this case, the case in Ireland. But just 3 days ago, we had a letter to JWsurvey in response to one of our articles. It was the article on the latest child abuse directive from Watchtower headquarters. And this person, I'll read briefly what he said. He said, "I would unquestionably report a case of child abuse immediately without a moment's hesitation to the authorities. I would then report the matter to the local body of elders." But note what he says. He says, they are innocent victims, not the adults. This is what makes the crime so abhorrent. I am one of Jehovah's Witnesses, educated, and yet sickened to the core by such ideas. Children should and must be protected. I will follow my conscience as I believe this is the right way to go. First, protect the child, then report it to the elders. Now, this is an active Jehovah's Witness who reported this to us on October 27th, just 3 days ago. It had nothing to do with the Ireland investigation or any other investigation that we've been working on. But I think it goes to the fact that what Covert was saying is that we may have inner turmoil that's going on within the organization itself that, much like the blood transfusion issue, which really came to a head 20 years ago and created a lot of internal dissent over the matter of what components would be allowed to be transfused into the body. That created sort of an upheaval, and ultimately the Jehovah's Witnesses ended up agreeing to allow blood fragments or blood fractions, which was sort of a salve to the problem. But now we're seeing people that are coming out within the organization, and as you know, even elders and coordinators of bodies of elders who are opposing this sanctioning of the elders for going to the authorities. So I think it speaks a lot to what's going on inside.
I mean, on that point, I mean, I was going to ask Jason, and he may or may not be able to comment, either because he doesn't know or because he can't comment. I mean, do you know how this matter has impacted the local witness community? Because I can imagine it must have resonated out at least in the local area. Are you aware of that, or is it something you're not able to comment on?
I don't know a huge amount, but I do know that all the people in the particular congregation were affected by that. But what I do also know is that when I sent my letter out, the one to all the elders in Ireland, it seems that there's another case as someone got in contact with JWsurvey, but they didn't say a huge amount, and they didn't leave us an email that we could contact them back. So I would hope that they will get in contact with us again, and that maybe we can look into that for him. He doesn't have to give us any information about himself. We don't need any identifying information about himself. But if he can give us more information, we can look into that. And if anything went wrong in terms of how Watchtower dealt with it, we can be able to find that out and be able to do something about it the same way as we've done something about it here.
Guys, I think we're going to start wrapping things up now. I'll ask you for your kind of final thoughts on this before we leave. But I think it's worthwhile just kind of, for what it's worth, commending those elders who were deleted, and indeed those that weren't deleted but did report to the authorities, commending them for doing the right thing. And it's actually kind of heartwarming to note that even when you have an organization that is so negligent, grossly negligent in putting children in harm's way, there are still individuals inside the organization that are willing to do what's necessary. The whole thing reminds me of some viewers will know that I went to London Bethel back in April. John Redwood was with me, and I had a conversation with the elder who took us on the tour around the Bethel. We managed to actually get some of it on camera. We were shooting for the documentary that I'm working on, and I asked him straight. I said, because we got to talking about child sex abuse, and I asked him straight, if it was a case of you knowing about a child sex predator, a child sex abuse predator, and the organisation telling you not to report, what would you do? And he actually confessed that he would report. So I know it's not just these elders in Ireland. I know there are other elders who would do the right thing. And any elders in that situation, or indeed the elders who were involved, who are listening to this, well done. You're not alone. There are more of you out there. And you're to be commended for putting children first. I think it's worthwhile kind of, making that statement. So just before we leave, I'm going to ask you guys for your summary thoughts on this. Covert, do you have anything to say before we call it a day?
Yeah, just again to plant a flag in that what we've seen in this case is proof that the Watchtower has directly sanctioned and punished elders for reporting child abuse. Now, this is the case that we know of. There may be other cases out there, and if there are, again, we would encourage people to either contact the newspapers, contact the authorities, JWsurvey if you feel comfortable contacting us, we will proceed anonymously. But the more of these cases that come to light, the stronger the pressure and the leverage that can be brought to bear onto Watchtower to change this, or to impose sanctions upon Watchtower if they refuse to change this. But just to repeat, this is the first case that we know of, and unfortunately, I suspect that there are many cases where the elders don't report because they fear something like this will happen. And there may be cases out there where the elders have reported this has happened, but it just hasn't got out of the congregation. So I think that's, as with everything, unfortunately, relating to Watchtower's handling of child sex abuse, I fear we're just kind of seeing the tip of the iceberg. Indeed.
And John, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, there's actually 2 points I'd like to cover briefly. The first is that we can't give details, but Jason and I have been independently investigating a number of files in congregation, pieces of information that we have received, and using as a sample congregation or a sample group of congregations. I believe we have one sampling of 10 congregations in which we averaged out over the past 20 years how many child abusers and child molesters were found within those 10 congregations, and it averaged out to 1.5 child molesters per congregation over that span. And we compared that with results from Australia and other countries where we have sample data. And so the message for Jehovah's Witnesses is that while many say that we've never heard of child abuse, it's never been a problem in our congregation, I can absolutely guarantee you that it has, and you don't know about it. It's within the files of the congregation. There are S-77 disfellowshipping forms. There are multiple letters written back and forth from the branch to the body of elders, how to handle such and such a person. And Jehovah's Witnesses literally do not know the danger that lies in their midst. And we have the data to prove it. And we will be talking about that more. But the second thing is that, as Covert mentioned, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our readers and our viewers have already done so, but we will treat this as respectfully and confidentially as possible because we have to. Our first obligation is to inform the police and child protective services if we know about a child abuser. And then the second obligation we have is to report the truth and to pass it on to qualified journalists like Barry White, who's done a fabulous job in exposing the information that we found without identifying specific individuals, because we know, and Jason will comment on this, we know that these people need to come forward and tell their stories. We receive emails every week at JWsurvey, and I'm sure the same is true of other websites, but we need these people to come forward, tell their stories, even if it's anonymously, so that we can help others and ultimately protect children and protect the communities surrounding children. Because remember, it's not just the congregations we're protecting, it's the community that may have a Jehovah's Witness or an ex-Jehovah's Witness pedophile that's in their midst and they don't know about it.
Yeah, it's certainly safe to say, based on the emails that we get through to JWsurvey, that in no way can we be accused of exaggerating the seriousness of this situation. I mean, you know, when people use words like rampant, they're not quite doing it justice. It really is everywhere. And that's why it's so urgent that Watchtower does something about it. Jason, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, just on the point of deleting elders. This isn't unique to this particular congregation. Deleting of elders is actually something they do quite regularly. particularly elders who are now part of an investigation. So if there's an investigation of child sexual abuse in a particular congregation and certain elders dealt with child abuse, those elders will be deleted by default by Watchtower because they want to distance those elders from the congregation as ministers. And so any of those elders, if there's any elders listening to this that have been deleted that way, we would like to hear from them and find out exactly what has happened since them being deleted, and have any of them ever been reinstated as elders.
Indeed. The door is open for, as Covert mentioned, for us to deal with people who approach us anonymously and with full privacy and confidentiality. We understand the situation. We've been Jehovah's Witnesses. We know what it feels like to have the axe of shunning looming over you at all moments. So you can be fully assured that if you do wish to approach JWsurvey, we will deal with your with the information appropriately, basically. Guys, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and information. Hopefully this has been informative for the viewers, even if it's not a subject this is fun or comedic. It's a serious issue, but it's one that we really do need to talk about. And I think it's poignant to finish on probably one of the best quotes from the newspaper article in question. I'm actually intrigued to know whether it's Jason here who's quoted, but it says, according to one individual familiar with the organization's handling of child abuse, it's very simple. If the organization turned around and reported it, we wouldn't be where we are today. It should be the case that someone comes along and says, I did this, and you'd report it. And you, the media, would have nothing to write about because there'd been no news. They've caused this article to be written because they didn't handle it right in the first place. And that, for me, summed up how ridiculous the whole situation is. It's in Watchtower's hands to deal with this, to implement the needed changes, and for whatever reason, they're just not doing it. So, again, I can only thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully it won't be too long before we have Watchtower in Focus 6. I don't know what the subject will be, but we'll tune in and find out. I do hope, though, that you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and as always, thank you for watching.